As always, we'll start with a look at global oil markets. Of course, the last day of trading across most markets around the world was Thursday because of Good Friday, Easter holidays yesterday. Brent is up 1.44%. That's quite a big rise, quite a lot of bullish sentiment there. On the back of not so positive developments, well, depending on how you look at it, continuing attacks on Russian infrastructure is also contributing to that tighter oil inventories out of the US market. And it does seem like OPEC will maintain its production cuts well into the second quarter of this year. So prices there seeing tight supplies across board. That's impacting WTI crude as well, natural gas and RBOB gasoline. Let's take a look at equity markets around the world. First, we start here in Nigeria. What's happened on the all share? For the all share index, it was up on Thursday, the last week of trading, although it was down from its high during the week. It started on a high during the week. It's lost a few thousand points there, ending the trading week on Thursday at 0.27%, with market capitalization ending at 59.12 trillion naira. Of course, the rally on Thursday from the previous day on Wednesday led by consumer goods and banking stocks. You can see the volumes of deals there at 10,257 and a moderate fair volume of deals at 623.07 million. Let's take a look at equity markets in Europe. So the Euro Stoxx 600 was up pretty much. I think that is bullish sentiment around tech stocks, but also the fact that we might be seeing a slowing down in rate hikes by central banks around the world. And that was mirrored pretty much across the rest of Europe. Interesting, in the Euro Stoxx 600, JD Sports, the sports retailer, for the first time in 4 years, saw a major all-time rally in its stocks, which actually impacted that particular index. And of course, London, Paris, Germany, France following suit, but Spain taking a small dip there, down by 0.40%. Let's take a look at North America. Pretty much similar outlook we saw on Thursday, close of trading. Dow Jones was up by 1.2%. I think markets are really anticipating signals from Jay Powell, US Fed chair, that it might hit its 2% inflation target. And I'll be talking a bit more about that later, before the end of the year. So rate cuts, perhaps a rate hold at the next sitting, and potentially another rate cut of up to 75 basis points before the end of the first half of this year. S&P was also up by 11, NASDAQ down slightly by 0.12%. Now to my business top picks for the week. And this week, I'm starting here in Nigeria because it was big news this week. Although the central bank governor had hinted at the annual bankers dinner last year that the bank would move towards a policy of recapitalization of the Nigerian banking sector. If you recall, the last recapitalization exercise was back in 2005 when the capital requirement was increased to 25 billion. At that time, that 25 billion naira, at that time, the dollar equivalent was about $130 million. So you can see that devaluation has really impacted the capital base, at least in dollar terms. But for international banks, that's Nigerian banks with international authorization, they will need a minimum capital requirement of 500 billion naira. And of course, there are different tiers depending on their level of authorization. Key things to note from this recent announcement is that banks have until March 31, 2026 to comply. They also have to submit an implementation plan by the end of next month, April 2024. Also, interestingly, the CBN has said, apart from your share capital and your share premium, you cannot include shareholders' funds or retained earnings in the calculation for your capital requirements. Some banks, of course, not too happy with that, but it's full steam ahead following the CBN regulation that came out 2 days ago. FTX co-founder, the founder of the former now defunct FTX exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, has been sentenced to 25 years on a 7-count charge of fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced in the Manhattan District Court. Judge Kaplan has said he was not remorseful. He's been fined a forfeiture of his assets to the tune of $11 billion. He was sentenced, he said his customers lost about $8 billion. There was also his lender traders to the hedge fund, which he set up, lost about 1.5 billion. So lots of interesting developments there from the cryptocurrency world. Ghana's central bank has held its key rate at 29%. Although inflation did slow in Ghana from January to February, the bank is being cautious, is holding rates. Of course, Ghana is a cocoa, it's an oil producer, it's also a gold producer. It's recently entered a plan to restructure its debt with its major creditors. It has about $5.4 billion of debt that it's looking to restructure with its major creditors. It's also been supported by $3 billion IMF program. So holding rates there across the country until the next MPC round. South Africa is witnessing the negative impact of El Nino. Of course, El Nino, a natural phenomenon which warms up the ocean and then causes dryness and drought. And it particularly impacts Southern Africa, not just South Africa. Zambia and Malawi are also being impacted. What that means is that crop yields are down in South Africa and the harvest is not as great. So the country's agriculture chamber has revised the forecast for white corn exports. And in fact, it's got so bad that South Africa may now have to import white corn. In South Africa, white corn is known as maize. It's a key staple input for some of its staple foods in that country. So we're seeing an 11% dip in planned harvests this year from white corn. And not since 2016 to 2017 has South Africa had to import white corn from outside of the country. Final story here on my top picks is that US Fed Chair Jay Powell, as I said earlier, sees inflation nearing its 2% target, even though it says the road ahead will be bumpy. And that means it's going to take a cautious approach to its next rate hike decision. It's done an all-time hike of 525 basis points over the last year. We're currently at around 5.5 to 5.2, 5.25 to 5.5% on rates in the US market. But there may be a silver lining in that cloud. That's it for my top picks for this week. And now let's take a look at some of the other top stories from around the world. Nigeria's Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee during the week increased the benchmark interest rate by 200 basis points from 22.75 to 24.75. The bank also retained the cash reserve ratio for banks at 45%, unchanged from its last meeting, but increased the cash reserve ratio of merchant banks from 10% to 14% while retaining the liquidity ratio at 30%. The present MPR rate of 24.75% may signal the bank's bid to tackle inflation and exchange rate fluctuations. Just a month earlier, the bank had hiked the rate by a whopping 400 basis points. Now, in the US, experts have blamed the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore on structural failures. While it is too early to say exactly what happened during the collision and the collapse that resulted, experts have revealed that the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which was designed in the 1970s, might not have been designed with the vast size and power of the ships that sail under it today in mind. A massive cleanup operation is now underway to clear the wreckage of the bridge from the river, with huge crane ships and thousands of relief workers headed for Baltimore earlier in the week. President Biden has announced an approval of $60 million in initial aid to rebuild the bridge. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has met more than a dozen US CEOs and academics as Beijing renewed efforts to woo back foreign investors and mend strained relations with the United States. Foreign direct investment in China has slumped in recent months as a combination of slower growth, regulatory crackdowns, onerous national security legislation, and questions about the country's long-term prospects have shaken confidence in the world's second biggest economy. The group of CEOs included Cristiano Amon of Qualcomm, Raj Subramanian of FedEx, and Steven Schwartzman of the Blackstone Group. President Emmerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe has appointed top-ranked banker John Mushayavanhu as the new governor of the central bank. This is coming almost a month before the end of John Magudya's term in office. Announcing the appointment in the government gazette on Thursday, Finance Minister Ntuli Nkube said Ngagmawa appointed the new government in terms of for the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe Act for a period of 5 years, ending in March 2029. The president initially announced the new governor's appointment in December, but could not immediately take over the post due to the previous governor's or the outgoing governor's delayed departure. Now, the European Commission, the regulatory branch of the EU, has opened 5 non-compliance investigations into Apple, Meta, and Alphabet under the new Digital Markets Act that went into effect on March the 7th. The new law requires 6 tech companies, Apple, Meta, Alphabet, Microsoft, and ByteDance, that are classified as gatekeepers to follow a list of regulations designed to ensure fairness and competition in the digital marketplace. Still on tech, Apple wants artificial intelligence technology on its iPhones and is reportedly in talks with 2 of its rivals and a Chinese internet giant to make it happen. The Wall Street Journal reported that Apple is in early discussions with Baidu, operator of go-to-internet search engine in China, to bring its generative AI model, AnyBot, to iPhones on the mainland in compliance with local law. According to the journal, Apple is also in discussions with Google and Microsoft-backed OpenAI for their AI systems to power Cupertino, California-based companies' devices around the rest of the world. China has initiated dispute settlement proceedings against the US at the World Trade Organization to safeguard its interests in the electric vehicle industry. China said it was contesting, and we quote, discriminatory subsidies under the US Inflation Reduction Act that said resulted in the exclusion of goods from China and other countries. The wide-ranging law provides billions of dollars in tax credits to help consumers in the US buy electric vehicles and companies produce renewable energy as Joe Biden, the US president, aims to decarbonize the US power sector. It said it was launching the proceedings to safeguard the legitimate interests of Chinese electric vehicle industries and to maintain a fair level playing field of competition for the global market. Kenyan financial technology companies will be heading to Accra, Ghana to pitch investment ideas. The 3i Africa Summit will be happening between May 13 and May 15. It's a global summit that seeks to transform Africa's economic landscape through technology, sustainability, and long-term capital allocation. Well, that's it for the market roundup.